For a long time, I believed the most important thing in a business was building a better product. That felt obvious in the early stages. If the product solved a real problem, people would eventually discover it. If it was good enough, word would spread and growth would follow. So, most of the energy went into improving the product itself, tweaking the offer, refining the experience, making sure what we built actually delivered value. And, to be fair, that work mattered. A weak product can't carry a business very far. But something interesting happened once the product was clearly good enough to work. Growth didn't suddenly accelerate. Sales didn't explode. The product had value, customers were happy, yet the business wasn't scaling the way I expected. That's when a realization started forming. The product wasn't the constraint anymore. Distribution was. A great product without distribution is invisible. That sentence sounds obvious once you say it out loud, but it took me a while to truly internalize it. When you build the product yourself, it feels like the center of everything. You know how much thought went into it. You know the problems it solves. But the market doesn't see that effort. The market only sees what reaches it. And what reaches it is determined by distribution. Once I started looking at businesses through that lens, a pattern became impossible to ignore. Some companies were growing incredibly fast, even though their products weren't dramatically better than competitors. Sometimes, the product differences were small, but their distribution was dramatically stronger. More people saw them. More people encountered them repeatedly. More people were introduced to the product through systems that kept working, whether the founder was present or not. That's when it clicked. The product creates value. Distribution delivers that value to the market. But without distribution, the value never reaches anyone. Distribution is what turns value into revenue. Once that became clear, the way I thought about growth started shifting. Instead of focusing only on improving the product, I began paying attention to how customers were actually discovering it. Where were people hearing about us? What channels consistently brought new attention? Which systems introduced the product to new people without constant effort? Some channels worked occasionally. Others worked consistently. And the consistent ones were far more powerful than I expected. Because when distribution works, it keeps working. A single improvement in the product might increase conversion slightly, but a strong distribution channel can increase how many people see the product every single day. That difference compounds quickly. Product improvements increase value. Distribution multiplies exposure. And exposure is what creates scale. Another thing became obvious over time. Products evolve constantly. Markets change. Customer expectations shift. Competitors introduce new ideas. So even great products eventually need to adapt. But strong distribution systems tend to last longer. An audience you build today might still be paying attention years from now. A channel that consistently brings in customers can continue producing results even as the product evolves. That creates a powerful advantage. Because once distribution exists, launching new things becomes easier. Instead of starting from zero every time, the business can introduce something new to people who are already paying attention. That's when the entire dynamic of growth changes. The business doesn't need to search for attention anymore. It already has a path to the market. I started noticing that many of the companies dominating their industries had solved distribution before anything else. They built audiences. They controlled channels. They developed systems that consistently introduced their ideas to large numbers of people. Once those systems existed, launching products became dramatically easier. Because distribution carried the product forward. Without distribution, every product launch is a struggle for visibility. With distribution, every launch begins with momentum. That's a completely different starting point. Another thing that became clear is that distribution compounds in ways products often don't. Products usually improve gradually. A feature gets added. A process becomes smoother. A result becomes slightly better. Distribution, on the other hand, can grow exponentially. An audience grows larger. A channel becomes more efficient. A brand becomes more recognizable. Each improvement amplifies the next one. Eventually, the distribution itself becomes one of the most valuable assets inside the business. Because it creates leverage. It gives the company the ability to introduce new ideas, services, or products to people who are already listening. And that ability changes everything. Instead of constantly pushing to be seen, the business begins attracting attention naturally. That's when I started realizing the real relationship between product and distribution. The product matters. It has to deliver real value. But distribution determines how far that value travels. Without distribution, the product stays small. With distribution, the product can reach scale. Distribution doesn't just support growth, it determines how big growth can become. Looking back, the shift in thinking happened when I stopped treating the product as the center of the business. The product is important, but it isn't the engine of growth by itself. The real engine is the system that connects the product to the market. That system is distribution. And once distribution becomes strong enough, something powerful happens. The business no longer starts from zero every time something new is created. The next product doesn't need to search for customers. The customers are already within reach. At that point, the company isn't just selling something. It has built the ability to reach people repeatedly. And that ability quietly becomes one of the most valuable assets a business can own.